I was wrong, and this is about a very minor thing in the rules that, quite frankly, I'm still not sure the absolute proper way to do this, but I don't really think it matters, and that's really what I want this video to be about discussing. And so, let me first go over how I made this mistake and what it should actually be, followed by then a discussion of what it means to have rules in a game in the first place. And so this has to do with shield block over there. And specifically, it has to do with when its trigger condition actually happens. Its trigger condition reads, while you have your shield raised, you would take physical damage, bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing from an attack. And already there's a conflict in the rules here, where physical damage also includes bleed, but no attack would do bleed directly, so clearly it's only intended to work with these, but we're going to get into more stuff like that later. So in my mind, I see you would take physical damage, and I'm like, okay, so that is when you would reduce your hit points, because that's when you would take damage, right? If you look at, this is the order that things happen when you are taking damage from some kind of damage roll. So, step 1, you roll the damage dice. Is this the point when shield block triggers? Are you about to take damage here? Is this when about to take damage is happening? Or are you about to take damage when you determine the damage type? Well, no. It needs to come after the damage type because if you remember, shield block specifies it needs to be physical damage. So, it needs to be after step 2. And then it's apply immunities, weakness, and resistance. It doesn't make sense for it to apply here, so therefore, it makes sense for it to apply right before you reduce hit points in step 4. That's where it makes sense. So my interpretation would have it be after this step 3, where you get resistances, weaknesses first. But that's not how it's intended, because a similar trigger exists in several other areas of the game, including champion reactions. And the good champion reactions, as in the good aligned champions, not just the champions that are actually good, although these are the champions that are actually good, they give a resistance. And this is about an enemy actually damaging your ally. So this makes you think that you would take damage happens before damage type, because this is when you do take damage. This requires the damage type to be determined, so it's messy. Nothing makes sense in terms of the damage rolls, like actual steps. This issue is further compounded by shield block saying you would take physical damage, implying that this happens before you actually take damage, which is, of course, the trigger of the champion reaction, which relies on giving resistances, which would thus happen and place this somewhere after step 1 before damage type is even configured. So, weird. So, how are we supposed to resolve this? And well, the designers actually answered this in a Q&A a while ago.
You need to get a new shield.
I've also seen a lot of people asking the questions like, okay, what if the attack deals multiple types of damage? Does the shield work against all of them, like if it's a flaming sword or something? And generally, like, what order it applies to and everything is going to be driven by your GM based on kind of like the story that's happening there at the table. Like, it can block.
Dear viewer, this... There are so few times in this game where you hear the fiction actually matters. So it's interesting to have the word of the designers be the order of the damage step in terms of the proper application of the rules is whatever feels right. This is... I'm going to go back to my main webcam because this is weird to me. Because Pathfinder really is a game that likes to codify everything. It has an emphasis on drop-in play groups with society play that requires a common understanding of what is rules as written to work. But something like, when you use the level 10 champion feat that lets you shield block and champion reaction at the same time, does the resistance apply before the shield would take that damage? And that would depend on how you think about champion reactions. Is it the champion doing some kind of magic to weaken the enemy's strength, to weaken their attack, or is it something that is bolstering your ally's physical self? It is applying a resistance, and whether or not the resistance gets applied first depends on the flavor of what's happening. But I can't seem to find a PFS ruling on that. If somebody knows where to find one, let me know in the comments down below, because I'm apparently looking now. So, and this type of weirdness for the application of shield block will actually have further implications with, again, Guardian. Because Guardian has a similar reaction to its Intercept Strike, at least in the playtest version, that gives a resistance. And Guardian can get ways to get several reactions to then shield block. So it will probably be shield blocking with Intercept Strike. So does that change? Because Intercept Strike is clearly you are resisting it and not like fully weakening the enemy's attack with magic. So what gives? And this is the surface of a lot of the stuff that goes on when you try to play this game perfectly rules as written, because there is no such thing as perfect rules as written. It doesn't exist. If you want to figure out the perfect rule and the perfect ruling for everything, it's a fool's errand. Like, that's what it comes down to. For me, the only reason I care so much about what is actually rules as written is because I make guides. And I want these guides to be applicable at just about every table. I want them to be applicable at Pathfinder Society, so I want to know what the official rulings are. For the average table, these holes in the rules are tiny, tiny, tiny things that you can just kind of discuss as humans and come to a reasonable conclusion on. Because that's how these things should work. But I was wrong about when shield block would really apply, which means that the stuff that I mentioned in like the Howled Wild guide with the werewolf having a weakness, that's wrong. The stuff that I mentioned in like other areas are all kind of slightly wrong now. And that's frustrating. Because I'm not going to go take down all those videos for this kind of minor error. I really just want this to show, have some grace with not everything in the rules is going to be perfectly clear, and I'd much rather have the game be human readable like this than super hard codified like the Magic rules are. Anybody that's tried to read the Magic the Gathering rule set will know what I'm talking about. When it comes to a tabletop role-playing game, the stakes are lower. Nobody's money matching in Pathfinder 2e. So you don't need that degree of rule specificity. It just goes to show that like the game has a different goal because it's a co-op game. People can kind of agree on what the good abilities, the good interactions, and all that kind of stuff are, what works, what doesn't. And house rules exist anyway, and this is tiny, tiny, again. But I also want to have another part to this video, which is, what is the purpose of Feats? And for this, we need to play another clip from another one of the game's designers.
Guitar guy Nick, my dyslexia kicking in here. If a feat exists, therefore it's implied you can't do like do an improv thing that matches a feat. Will this be written into a book in any way to resolve this?
The existence of a feat does not imply that you can't do the thing without the feat. The feat is always the best way to do the thing. There might very occasionally be feats that really are kind of hard lock limiters, but you know, we even kind of say at places in the book, it's not a hard rule because you can't really have a hard rule when you're talking about feats, because feats are how you do just about everything, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're incredibly wide, but I really push back at well, there's a feat, so if there's a feat, that means I can't do it. No, it means you can't do it as well as the feat, right? Mm. So if the feat says that, oh, you can high jump twice as far, you know, then maybe it's like, well, okay, that might be a hard limiter, you can't break that, but maybe if you take this action over multiple rounds, we can improvise a way to say, like, you really need to get an extra long running start, and then that can give you a circumstance bonus, and we'll add 5 feet to this. Never take the feat as a blockade. take it as the high water line, right? The person with the feat can do this thing the best and the most efficiently. So if someone else wants to do that thing, and it makes sense for the person to be able to do that thing, like a feat that gives you a spell-like ability, you probably shouldn't be able to just pull magic out of your butt and, and make it
right.
happen, right? But a feat that involves doing something physically that kind of anybody should be able to do, say like, okay, if the feat allows them to do it 10 feet farther and at only 2 actions, then you can do it, but it takes you 3 actions and you don't get the 10-foot bonus.
And it kind of goes on like this with further examples, but I just want to pause it there because that's the core idea. The core idea is you shouldn't view the game as, ooh, these feats are here, I can't let my players do anything the feat would. It's stuff like, oh, my group intimidation feat that lets me try and coerce an entire group of people is actually useful because it lets me coerce all of them equally well as I would coerce one person, where you might give a severe penalty to somebody without that feat trying to do a similar thing. And that's what a lot of this would actually come down to. It should be the feeling of, these are the most efficient ways to do something. But Pathfinder 2e is a game where you are allowed to improv actions. You can improv interact with the environment. You should never have it be consistently more efficient than the feats in the core combat game loop, because, I mean, if you're coming to play Pathfinder, I think you're coming here to interact with the combat engine at least somewhat. And if you're not, I think that PBTA games may serve you better. So, there's now a more interesting balance to strike, and I can't really suggest going heavy into improv actions because that's too table dependent. But in your own games, note, the official ruling from Paizo is that do not respect official rulings that much. And that's really where my mistake came from. My mistake with Shield Block was trying to interpret the damage rules as written as doctrine rather than guidance to how to resolve effects. Because rules really are guidance, not rules. And mind you, I'm saying that, but if you're playing Pathfinder Society, the rules are rules. But for a home game, you can do stuff in this system. Don't feel constrained by the fact that, ooh, there's maybe a feat out there, I don't know if I should allow this. Allow it, and just make it expensive action-wise. Anyway, that's my 2 cents for this video. I wish you all a good one. You can go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you liked this video. I'm gonna go back to posting guides on how to actually use the rules to your benefit soon. My next video is going to be a big doozy, so get ready for that one. I think it might change the entire landscape of min-maxing. Somehow I'm not joking.